The day's consideration of report of the ad hoc committee on the request for an increase in the amount to be raised through the diaspora bond from the international market. Honorable members will recall the report was laid on Thursday, 3rd March 2016. Honorable Garba Shehu will move for its consideration.
Mr. Speaker, my honorable colleague, my name is Shehu Garba Noma. I rise to move that the House will consider the report of the ad hoc committee on the request of Mr. President for an increase in the amount to be raised through the diaspora bond from $100 million to $300 million under the 2016 to 2018 borrowing plan. Mr. Speaker, I so move.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable colleagues, I am Honorable Dr. Chukwuemeka Ujam. I rise to second the motion that the committee report be laid and considered by this House, as moved by Honorable Garba Shehu.
Honorable colleagues, I rise to move that this House to dissolve to the Committee of Whole for consideration of the report. I so move.
Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Committee of Whole. I so second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against it say nay. Ayes have it. House hereby resolves into Committee of the Whole. There's an announcement that I'm supposed to make.
Thank you, honorable colleagues. I will call on Honorable Shehu Garba to give an insight into the report.
Mr. Chairman, my honorable colleagues, this report was laid on the floor on the 3rd of March this year. Mr. Chairman, the House will recall that under the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the executive arm of government is expected to lay out its plan for borrowing as a prerequisite to the consideration of the annual budget. It is in this light that the executive presented a request under the 2012 to 2014 borrowing plan. There was a proposal by the executive to increase the diaspora bond, for which we had earlier approved $100 million for the government to borrow. The government had proposed to raise it to $300 million US. And this request was considered by the previous assembly, that is the 7th assembly. The report was prepared, but unfortunately, it was not considered by the House before the expiration of the life of the 7th assembly. So this request by Mr. President, which was presented on the floor here, which was read on the floor, was simply a representation of the same request which had earlier been presented to the House. The request is for an increase in the diaspora bond from $100 million to $300 million under the government 216 to 218 borrowing plans. This is supposed to serve as one of the sources of funding that the government is planning to tap into. The diaspora bond is simply a bond which is issued by the government and specially targeted at Nigerians in the diaspora. It is supposed to be a way to get Nigerians out of the shore of this country to be involved in the development of the country. And the earlier bond of $100 million, which was approved, was subscribed, I think was oversubscribed. And as a result of the enthusiasm that was shown by Nigerians, I think the government had proposed to tap into this source of funding under the 2016 to 2018 borrowing plan to supplement the budget. The committee, as I can see can be seen from the report, the committee received presentation from the various agencies of government including the Federal Ministry of Finance, the Debt Management Office, and of course from the Fiscal Responsibility Commission. And we found out that it was a straightforward request. This source of funding is supposed to be a relatively cheaper source of funding for the government, and the committee felt this should be recommended to the whole House for approval so that the government can, of course, begin to plan when they are submitting proposals for the budget in the years to come. We want to recommend that the House approve this request, which had earlier been approved, presented to the 7th Assembly. But unfortunately, the process of its approval by the Assembly was not concluded. So we are recommending that the House approve this single recommendation that the diaspora bond, for which there is a current approval of $100 million, should be raised to 300 so that the government can avail itself of this source of cheap funding. Mr. Chairman, I want to raise my point, and if there are any questions, I will entertain them.
Just one recommendation for the report, and the recommendation is that the House do approve the request of Mr. President on the increase in the diaspora bond from $100 million Euro bond to $300 million Euro bond captured under the federal government external borrowing plan 2016 to 2018. Honorable Betty, you know you can only comment on the recommendation. You know.
I have no problems with the recommendation per se, but all I want to say is the report, I would have wanted the report to have taken cognizance of the dwindling resources of government vis-a-vis because of the drop in oil price, and also the current exchange rate, the implications of it in repaying the bond as I went due. But nothing of that sort was mentioned. I wish the committee had mentioned something like that. That's all I want to say, Mr. Chairman.
That we should, widen the scope of the borrowing. While deep inside the recommendation, it says that it's going to be used for priority capital projects, and I expected that to be properly captured within the recommendation so that we know exactly what these things that we are widening the scope, from the threshold of 500 to, from 300, 100 million to 300 is going to be used for. So it's within the recommendation. I wanted the recommendation to go further in itemizing exactly what we are borrowing for, so that the change mantra is really showing to be so transparent, sir. That's my comment. Thank you.
Adopted. And what you have just said is captured in the main report too. So your fears already are laid. So colleagues, that the House do approve the request of Mr. President on the increase in the diaspora bond from $100 million Euro bond to $300 million Euro bond captured under the federal government external plan 2016-2018. Carried. Leader.
This House do revert back to plenary to report progress. I so move.
The House hereby reverts to plenary. The House in the Committee of the Whole considered the report of the ad hoc committee on the request for an increase in the amount to be raised through the diaspora bond from the international market and approved the only recommendation of the report. Leader.
Do adopt the reports of the Committee of Whole. I so move.
Second motion moved by the Leader of the House.
In support of the adoption of the report, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader.
Honorable colleagues, I rise to move that this House stand adjourned till tomorrow, Wednesday, the 20th of April, 11 a.m. I so move.
I rise to second the motion that the House adjourn to 20th of April 2016 at 11 a.m. I so second.
The House stands adjourned till Wednesday, 28th of April 2016, 11 a.m. in the morning.